Let's start with Afghanistan. We talk about how we're already on track for perhaps the deadliest month of the war for the United States and NATO forces. And now this contested election. And I'm wondering, it just seems to be, Garrick, another red flag to the U.S. about what are we doing?
Well, there's the political dimension, and elections show the inability of the government to have any effective role there. And there's also the military side. Right now, the vote counting, which is going to go on for a few more weeks and may lead to another runoff, puts us in a difficult situation because although, yes, we're seeing democracy in action, we're not seeing any kind of really confident sign that that election result is going to lead to a more effective government. So what are you left with in your hands? Not much.
The United States, what, they want to see a runoff now?
Well, I think there's really no good outcome at this stage. Karzai, it looks like Karzai is going to win, and the vote counting is always a painful process. But even if he does, he's not an easy candidate for the U.S. to support, not only because the elections are being contested, but because his running mate, Marshal Fahim, has been accused of being involved in the drug trade. And this goes to another point and problem in Afghanistan right now, which is that the Taliban is more deeply involved in drug trafficking and drug trade than was initially thought, as recent NATO military operations have found. And that's going to mean more unrest both in Afghanistan and in Pakistan.
And then we add to this, the United States is doing a total look again at the military option.
Quite aside from what's happened on the political side of things, you're hearing interesting words coming from Admiral Mullen, the head of the Joint Chiefs, saying the war's not going well, talk about needing more troops. General McChrystal on the ground in Afghanistan has called for studies from think tanks and others testing what we are doing there militarily. Is this the right policy? It's very unusual, I would say, for military leaders to question what they are doing. My suspicion is that not only the military, but people in the White House are starting to say, do we need a policy review on our position and strategy and presence in Afghanistan?
And this is a big thing, not just sort of, do we need more troops? Do we need to alter the strategy? We're talking about, do we stay or do we go?
Well, there's the shadow of Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam, as has been noted in the press, that Lyndon Johnson got trapped in Vietnam. The military just said, send us more troops and we'll do the job. The military now is saying, in effect, Mr. President, you can send more troops and we need more troops. We're not telling you we can do the job. And that's the problem that Obama has to face.
All right, another conundrum for the Obama administration, Iran. September, next month, of course. That was sort of the soft deadline that this administration had said for Iran to respond to a dialogue the United States is trying to encourage. Without a dialogue, I guess sanctions? Where do we stand on sanctions, and can they really work?
Well, it's possible that there's going to be certainly pressure around sanctions and more sanctions, but my feeling is that unless you have China and Russia on board, they're going to be ineffective. And that's because China and Russia are key investors in Iran's energy sector, and they've actually benefited hugely from not being part of the existing sanctions. Just this last spring, you saw the Chinese coming in with a $70 billion oil and gas deal to develop southwestern Iran reserves. Russians are selling the Iranians billions of dollars worth of nuclear technology, radar, and missiles. So there's very little impetus for these countries to get on board with this. Yeah,
they're doing okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing about the sanctions, and of course the idea here is to get the Iranians to negotiate away their nuclear program. But by enforcing this, are we not also strengthening the hand of the hardliners who right now appear to be teetering?
Well, this week we're seeing all kinds of steps being taken. First of all, the Chancellor of Germany, Merkel, and President Sarkozy of France were saying today and yesterday that, yes, we should go ahead with sanctions if the Iranians don't really behave right on the nuclear issue. But they know, we all know exactly what you said. There is now an ever deeper and visible split between the hardliners and the reformers, with Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, sort of trying to bridge the two. And so any kind of sanctions are simply going to strengthen the hardliners. So do you back off on the nuclear issue and potential sanctions, showing and where they can say, look, we scared the West and the rest of the world off? Do you push ahead and strengthen the hardliners? Meanwhile, this trial is going on. And who do you end up strengthening? This is a catch-22 of the worst kind.
We're going to run out of time, and I want to bring up what you wrote about this week, which is actually Japan and a fading Japan. We've got an election coming up this weekend. We may see a change in government. We may also see a change in where Japan sits in the world's economy. Yeah. From number 2 to number 3?
Yeah, this is a real seismic shift, and it's probably going to take place at the end of this year. In the second quarter of this year, Japan's economy contracted by over 15%. This is the worst contraction of any rich economy in decades, and what that means is that China is going to overtake them faster, within a couple of years, faster than was initially thought. This is going to put China in the spotlight yet again. We already know that they're the 800-pound gorilla in the region. They're becoming more and more important, both as a trade partner for both the U.S. and Japan, now the #1 trade partner for Japan over the U.S., but also as a political partner in the region. And I think you can see that with the U.S.-China strategic dialogue in July, which actually made Japan very nervous.
Japan going to #3. For the United States, what is the real impact here? Is it just a psychological thing? We get over it?
Oh, there's a psychological element, but in terms of real substance and size, this is a historic moment. This is the first time that the industrialized world, the world is coming out of a recession in which we were not going to be pulled out by either Europe, the U.S., or Japan, the traditional economic locomotives. We hope it's going to be China, Asia in general. I find it interesting that today, if we're really in the world of the G2, the U.S. and China, both nations right now in their economies are being fueled largely by stimulus programs. China has one, we have one. How solid, how lasting are these going to be, as you indicated?
Right.
We don't know.
We don't know. And there could be a downturn as a result of when those programs end. But that's going to have to wait for another day. Rana Foroohar, thank you very much. Garrick Utley, a pleasure as always.